Hello and welcome to the Fishing Guide Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Wiegmann. Jon Stein is in the house, and the reason why, he's with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. He is one of the fisheries biologists. Actually, what's your official title?
District Fisheries Supervisor.
That's a mouthful for me, man. But what I know is that means he keeps an eye on the fish and the fish populations, not just on Beaver Lake, but other reservoirs like Lincoln Lake and Swebco, and that includes streams. So it's good to have him in here because it's spring and people want to know about walleye fishing, and they want to know about white bass, and they want to know about crappie. Yeah. And so that's what we're going to touch on. So if you're trying to figure out what those fish are doing and how they spawn, we're gonna talk about that. This is gonna be good. This could be very informative. So, and maybe I'll drop some hints on what lures to catch them on.
That's right.
So, but start with walleyes. Walleyes super popular.
Yep. So right now the walleye are they're moving into the rivers if we can get some inflows with some rain.
Right.
They're moving. What's interesting is we actually see the walleye will move into the White River. About the second week of March.
Right.
They're in there really hot and heavy the second week of March, and they're spawning. But if you look at other tributaries, like tributaries of Table Rock Lake, like the Kings River,
right,
it's going to be the third week of March before they're in there spawning.
Huh.
And so second week of March is normally between the first and second week of March. They're in the White River and Beaver Lake, and War Eagle Creek as well. And we've noticed, like I said, it's a week earlier than the.
Is that because it's flatter and there's some more pasture land up here?
Yeah, you wonder if maybe it's a little further south, so the river may have warmed up. There may be just the river's warmer. Maybe the water temperature's warmer than the Kings at this time of year.
Is that how they know when to start? Or, or does it have to do with the moon cycle?
It's water temperature. So
it's water temperature.
If water temperature is normally if it's about 48 to 52, 53 degrees sometimes, that's when they're normally going to be moving in there. Males will be in early. They'll be in shallow water early.
Which means they're up there because the water temperature is 53.
Yep. They're up there, and I would bet right now if we have inflows and there's if you can find that first shoal, the first shoal out of the lake, that's where they normally stack up. Walleye do, and it can be pretty good. And there's the population in beaver is getting better over time.
Right.
It's fairly new population. The biggest year class we got that we saw, one of the earliest ones, was in 2008. And so we have some pretty big fish in the population right now, and fishing is getting better. The population's getting better. You compare that to like Table Rock Lake and Bull Shoals. Walleye have been in those lakes for a long time, a lot longer.
Yeah.
And they're catching some big fish and tributaries of Table Rock Lake. I've seen pictures of one that was over 16 pounds.
Wow. Really big.
So they're a popular fish because they're fun to catch and they're good to eat.
So the males, they move up first, and then the females move up after that. A couple weeks later, or somewhere in there, a week later.
I think what females will do is they'll sit out and maybe down in deeper water, and they'll move in when they're ready to spawn. And when a female's ready to spawn, it comes up into the shallow water, it spawns, and then I think they leave.
So it's not recruited by a male.
No.
They literally come in, not like a bass, like a largemouth where they recruit the female.
They just come in and they release their eggs. Their eggs are, once they're fertilized, they actually are adhesive or they're sticky.
Right.
So they fall to the bottom and they stick to rocks. And then they take anywhere from, depending on the water temperature, it could take 7 to 14 days to hatch. So they just come in and they're not a nest spawner. They spawn over rocks.
So they need that flow. They need the flow of the current to
they need a little
create
bit of current.
The male. When he releases, then they need that to cover the eggs.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, because like they can actually spawn in the lake with no flow. You know, they just they basically just get together and the female releases the eggs and then the male comes in and fertilizes the eggs and then they sink to the bottom. And so, yeah, they spawn walleye. A lot of people overlook the fact that walleye actually spawn down by the dam,
right,
on riprap or on gravel points. And you can actually go down there and catch them on the dam or down in that area right now until, they'll be in there until the end of March.
Right. Interesting. And so tell us what the length limit is and the numbers before we get too far.
So we have an 18-inch minimum length limit, so anything less than 18 inches has to be thrown back.
Okay.
And then there's a creel limit of 4 for walleye.
What's the average weight of an 18-inch walleye?
It's probably going to be around a couple pounds, pound and a half.
Pretty good sized fish.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Probably 2 pounds. Yeah. So they can be, they're pretty good at that size. You can get a lot of meat off of them at 18 inches. But so one of the reasons we have a minimum length limit like that is a lot of people ask, why don't you have a slot limit?
Right.
And slot limits work really well when you have a slower growing population. These things grow really fast. They're taking, they're 18 inches in 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
You compare that to some of the lakes in the upper Midwest, it may take 6 years to get to 18 inches. So that's why we don't need a slot limit. We have a minimum length limit. And we just don't think we need that right now. And we have some people ask all the time, why don't we have a slot limit like they have up in the north, in some of those lakes. And we actually had a lake, Greer's Ferry Lake had a protective slot limit. I think it was like 18 to 24 inches.
Right.
You had to release any fish in that slot, and it didn't improve the fishery. It's just because it wasn't protecting what needed to be protected.
Right.
And if you put a slot limit on, you're wanting to push harvest to small fish.
Yeah.
So you have let's say you have an 18 to 24 inch slot limit. You can catch anything. You can catch those fish that are and keep them that are 15 to 17 inches.
Right.
And we don't want to do that on beaver because the ones that are easiest to catch are those 15 to 17 inch fish.
Right. Get them a little bigger.
Yeah, we want to get them a little bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. Let's go over to, let's go with white bass.
Okay.
White bass is, I know when I moved down here from Iowa, it was phenomenal white bass fishing. It was like for coming somewhere and going fishing, white bass were easy to catch in the spring.
Right.
And so tell us their reproduction. Okay. How do they do it? Who moves in first?
So same type of thing with walleye. They males are going to move in first, and they're going to normally try to, in the spawning populations in the river arms, they're going to be running up to that first shoal, and if they can get up that high, and they similar type spawning event, they just spawn in the open water. Eggs are fertilized, and they actually roll in the current.
Right.
And so white bass are similar spawning to walleye, and they come in after walleye. Normally if the walleye spawn, and let's say in the White River is done the 3rd week of March completely.
Right. Wow.
Sometimes the males will be there. Then the white bass will come in, when the water temperature gets a little warmer, 55, 58, somewhere in there, you'll start seeing. So it's sometimes it can be, we've been out electrofishing for walleye and the water temperature jumps up and we'll go in and see thousands of white bass at the same time the walleye are in there. So it can be really good fishing for, certain times, that time of year, or this time of year can be really good for white bass because they're concentrated below, in those areas, and very popular.
Yeah, and I think they're hungry all the time.
Yeah.
I think that they spawn, and if they could, like a minute later after they spawn, they'd think nothing about biting the lure right afterwards. They're not like thinking they have to rest or recoup or go, post spawn somewhere out there and sit. They seem to be hungry all the time.
Yeah.
What's the what do you think the average weight of a white bass is on Beaver Lake right now?
We're seeing some average weights, probably a pound and a half, but there's some really big ones out there still. We've seen some 3-pounders, which is huge white bass, and there's pretty good numbers of big fish in there right now.
Yeah.
And those are probably, white bass, a 7-year-old fish is pretty old.
Yeah, it's really old.
That's an old white bass, and so they normally, they die pretty quick. They're short-lived species, but
is that the reason why there's no limit on them on Beaver Lake?
Yeah, it's just we think that the time when they're most sought after and you can catch the most numbers of them is in the spring, and it's during a small amount of time. So we don't think there's an over harvest of white bass. There's a limit to the number of white bass somebody is going to keep and fillet.
I don't know. I've seen people really fill their boat.
Yeah, we've seen a couple guys do that, but it's only during the
spring when they're easy.
When they're easy to catch is when you see that. And so we don't think there's an issue with over harvest when it's only a small amount of time when they're in there shallow.
And there's no length limit, right?
No, there's no length limit, no creel limit, and they if we were going to go and sample the lake with gill nets, which is what we sample white bass, stripers, walleye with, we're going to catch 10 to 1 white. We're going to catch a ton of white bass in those gill nets.
Yeah.
Every year we just they seem to get off good, decent spawns.
How big is your gill net? What's the mesh on that?
It can be anywhere. So they're experimental gill nets. They go from 3/4 of an inch all the way up to 4 inches. So they can be pretty big. They can be small up to big. We have a bunch of different mesh sizes in it, so it can catch all sizes of white bass out there.
Interesting. And that takes us to crappie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I left the best to last, or it's hard saying because all those 3 fish are. Don't you think those are the most popular and most sought after?
Yeah.
From anglers, from bank fishermen to all anglers, not just people with boats.
Right. This time of year, they're definitely that's definitely what everybody's going after this time of year in the spring.
So how does the crappie reproduce?
So crappie they're a nest spawner that they'll spawn over brush, and so they normally come in shallow in the spring, as you know. Right now they're actually pretty deep right now, but they'll come in shallow and they'll spawn over near brush, and we've had some really good natural reproduction and good year classes of crappie the last 4 or 5 years because of all the high water that we've had. Every year that we have an event where, like right now, if the lake started coming up and it got up into the into the flood stage, and it stayed in the flood stage at least through July or August, we know we're going to have a really good crappie spawn. It's basically when you have high water, that means there was some flooding event, or there was some, and that brings in a lot of nutrients, and that just drives the food web. Also, those small crappie, small walleye, small bass that have spawned, or that are little babies, they're actually able to find a place to hide and not getting eaten real easily. So it just drives the fishery when we have these huge these high water events. And Beaver's had a ton of high water events in the last 5 years. In fact, since 2008, we've had more high water events on the lake than the previous 40 years of the reservoir.
I believe it.
And that's incredible for the fish population, especially for crappie.
Yeah. And so they're nest building, so the male goes in, makes the nest first.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then the female comes in by itself?
Yeah, it'll come in and spawn, yep.
And then the male protects the eggs after the female leaves?
For a while, kind of like a bass, yep.
Just the black fry, they kind of look like?
Yeah.
So, and then from there it's post-spawn.
Yep.
I don't know if people like post spawn. Every time you say post spawn about any kind of fish, it usually means they're suspended out, trying to recruit what's going on. Tell us what the length limit is on beaver and the creel limit.
Okay, it's a 10-inch minimum length limit, so they have to
Okay.
be 10 inches long to keep, and
All right.
15 is the creel. You keep 15, yep.
And just give us a synopsis of the other fish that live in this lake, except for the brim, because I can do the brim report for you. They're everywhere around brush.
Everywhere.
If you want to go catch brim, all you got to do is take your graph or just go find a brush pile and throw a worm on a hook and a bobber, and you're going to catch
gonna
brim.
catch 'em, huh?
Oh yeah, there's some of them are incredible. How many are in there? But what about some of the other fish? How about stripers don't reproduce naturally on beaver?
No, they do not
No.
naturally reproduce. We have to stock the striped bass and, to maintain the fishery, and we've been stocking around 200,000 stripers every year,
Right.
and that's basically producing a really good fishery. We want to make sure that we have good numbers of fish out there. We don't want to have too many striped bass. We want to
Right.
have really fast growth. And right now, the striped bass fishery, striped bass population, they're getting to 26 inches in 4 years.
Right.
So that's really fast growth, and that's what we want. We were trying to produce a trophy fishery, and which we have. You compare that to a lake that has natural reproduction, like Lake Texoma.
Yeah.
22-inch fish is 4 years old.
Wow.
So they don't grow very good in Texoma. There's a ton because there's too many of them.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we have the right balance of the numbers so they can grow fast. And actually, this year we're going to be working with guides to collect carcasses.
Again, like last year?
we did.
Oh,
Yeah, we
good.
did it, and so we can make sure
Right.
that those stripers are continue to grow really well, because we've noticed that there's a really good. We're getting some good year classes from our stocking. We're seeing a lot of smaller stripers in the fishery right now, and we just want to make sure that they keep growing and it produces a trophy fish.
Let's talk about the largemouth, smallmouth Kentucky population. That's pretty good. And even if the water's low, they still can reproduce pretty good.
Yeah,
Can't they? They have a lot of places.
Yeah, they have a lot of places to go and spawn. But when we have those high water events,
Yeah.
I mean, we know that if it stays up like in the floodplain until August, September, we know we're gonna get the largemouth bass is done. They're gonna have a good spawn and good natural reproduction, and then they survive.
Right.
To the next year is what we're looking for, and that's called recruitment. And with these high water events, we've been getting the largemouth has been just getting off really good spawns. In fact, we're seeing a lot more largemouth than we are spotted bass.
Really? That's good.
Yeah, it is, because during low water, when you don't have a lot of these inflows and you don't have high water during the summer, spring and summer, we'll actually see a lot more spotted bass in the fishery and less largemouth. And since we've had all these high water events, the largemouth numbers are really good right now.
And all this is based on forage, because they have to have something to eat.
Right.
So there's no way to survey crawdads that I know of,
No.
unless you go to where they serve them and
Yeah.
eat them. That's the only way I know you can survey one. But so shad spawn how many times a year?
They can spawn a few times a year.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with this high water, when we get floods, it brings in nutrients, keeps the water, super productive, and that produces the food that shad eat.
Right.
Like phytoplankton, zooplankton, and that just increases the number of shad out there when you have these high water events that bring in nutrients. There's a ton of shad, there's a ton of bluegill, there's a ton of different forage out there that just makes fishing really good, makes the populations really good for a few years down the road.
It's like going to a buffet and you get there first, or you go to a buffet after the sumo wrestling team has been there.
Yeah.
And there's just scraps.
They're just scraps.
You can't
left.
get bigger if you're eating scraps.
That's right.
You only get bigger when you get there first and you get all that food. But that's good. Tell us. Well, I know what. I'll just go into Tackle Time. Tackle Time sponsored by PICO Lures. PICO Lures has a complete line of hard and soft baits. They can catch all these fish that we've been talking about, and so make sure you check them out online, or they're in your local tackle store too. If they don't have them, just have them call Mitch, and he'll fix that up. So, tell us what's going on, what's new, what are you working on project wise?
So one project we're working on, we put together this something called the Northwest Arkansas Fish Habitat Alliance. And we actually have a board. So there's a professional bass angler on it. Greg Bohannon is on the board. Aaron Jalla from Hook, Line, and Sinker. We have a couple teachers, several people from the Game and Fish, and basically what we're planning on doing is trying to get funding for habitat projects, to fund habitat projects in Northwest Arkansas. We've requested we have a project proposal out there for $100,000. We're actually going to be trying to put mossback fish habitat in at least 7 lakes in the area, and we're going to actually be working with high schoolers, their ag departments, or outdoor education programs, where we actually, if we get the funding to buy the structures, we're going to actually go out with the high school students, help them put these structures together, and then help sink them in the lake. It's a way we can start putting some fish habitat in some of these smaller lakes,
like Lincoln.
Like Lincoln Lake. Yeah, we have a project with Lincoln High School, and we're going to be doing that in April. We also have a project with Cedarville High School, which is going to be working on Lake Fort Smith. And then we have several other lakes planned and several other high schools planned if we can get the funding that we've requested. And so that's coming up. That's going to be that's an opportunity for us to improve fish habitat in lakes, but also try to get new kids involved in the outdoors. That's something we're really focusing on. So yeah, that's coming up in the next, we're going to be doing 2 projects this spring. And if we get funding, we'll be doing at least 7 lakes in the next year. There
you go. Hey, if they want to get in touch with you, they want to visit about that and opportunities maybe of helping out with the fish habitat or something, where would they go, and what's the information there?
So I'll just give my phone number, 479-640-6422 is a way they can contact me. Also, we have a Facebook page. It's just AGFC Fisheries Division. And that's a Facebook page. I think we also have it's also a Twitter account. But there's a way you can contact us. Basically, contacting me with that phone number is the way to go.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Well, like we always like to end the show, make sure you keep your hook sharp, lures in the water.